afternoon, and welcome to WCVO's Thanks for the Memories. Your host on today's program is Harold Bachman, and his special guest is Frank Vosler. Let's join them both now in Studio B for Thanks for the Memories.
Frank, it's nice to have you here, and I think we're going to have a program that people are going to be very interested in. And I am hoping that they will go to the phone and call some of their friends, because I think there's a lot of people that would love to hear this program that maybe are not geared, you might say, to listen to the program. Frank, you were born in Detroit, weren't you?
Yes.
And that's been about 74 years ago, hasn't it?
Just about that, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Now, did you live in Detroit a lot of your lifetime?
No, I was there about 6 weeks.
6 weeks?
Yeah.
What did your father do?
My father worked for the Detroit Edison Company. He was a civil engineer.
I see.
And he had a good job there, but my mother got bronchitis, and the doctor told her to come to the lakes. She'd have to move away from the lakes. So she took her 2 boys and went back to Pennsylvania, northwest Pennsylvania, Mercer County, just east of Greenville, and to her folks' home. So that's where I spent the next 3 or 4 years of my life.
Now, you say that she took her 2 boys. You were one of them, weren't you?
Yeah, my brother was 6 years older.
6 years older.
Yeah.
I see. Now, where did you go in Pennsylvania?
Well, it was northeast of Youngstown, east of Greenville, Pennsylvania. And a little, actually, it was in the country. The nearest village was Shakespeareville, about 2 miles away, 1.5 miles, I guess. But my earliest memories are from that home. That was home to me.
And you remember that?
Oh,
you
yeah.
don't remember much about being up in Detroit, because you're only
No,
a
I
child.
have no memory of the first 6 weeks. But Pennsylvania, yes, I remember that all right. The big collie dog named Rex, and we played all 4 years, I guess. He was my constant companion.
And that's the one you said is the smartest dog?
No,
that's not the one.
No, it's the dog we had later. But there was Topsy the horse. There were other horses, and there were the cows, the pastures, and the fields. And my uncle farmed by horse. He didn't have a tractor.
Yeah, a lot of people did that.
Yeah. So after a day's work, of course, I didn't do the work. I just played. But when the work was done, we had to take horses down to pasture and get the cows, bring them up for milking. So my brother and I would ride the horses.
That was fun, wasn't it?
Yeah. And even after we left there, every summer we'd go back for the summer. That was our vacation. And we did a little more work as we got bigger. But
well, you remember these things. Sounds to me like living out there on the farm like that, that you had all sorts of conveniences inside, toilets and everything. Is that right?
No. We had to brave the weather a little bit to go to the toilet.
That's right. And did you have a lot of heat in the house? Did you have a furnace that heated the whole house?
I think they finally got a furnace. I don't think they had it in that day. The only heat I remember was the potbelly stove and the kitchen stove. The kitchen stove was fired by wood. Well, they both were, really. But the potbelly stove in the living room, they got pretty hot, but the people would gather around it. You know, you could call that central heating. Only the central part of the room was heated.
That's right. But you know, they didn't heat the upstairs in those days.
They had little holes in the corner of the ceiling, like grates, about a foot square.
Yeah.
And on the floor above that, there was something you could close or open. go on to warm a bedroom, or you'd open that, and the heat would rise from the room below.
Well, I still think you were a little richer than my parents were, because I remember there was no heat upstairs at all. You couldn't spare it. And during the night, there was no heat downstairs, because you couldn't spend the money to keep that stove going at night when it wasn't needed.
Well, they had hundreds of acres. There's lots of wood.
Hundreds of acres.
Well, I don't know how many, but altogether there's probably 400 or 500 acres.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you probably had quite a bit of wood then around.
Yeah, most of it was not farmed, but they would, of course, grow enough hay for the cows and the horses, and then vegetables and whatever.
Do you know what we would do? We would get our little wagon, and we'd get down to the railroad, and you could usually find coal along the side of the railroad, where either, I don't know whether somebody threw it off, or whether it was that the
spilled off of the trains.
Spilled off of it,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
But you could usually find coal. And that was our way of getting coal.
Yeah. Well, that's all right.
Okay. Now, did you start the school then
Well,
in Pennsylvania?
No, we only spent 3 or 4 years in Pennsylvania, and then we moved to Alliance, Ohio. My father got a job there at Youngstown Sheet and Tube. I said Alliance, no, I'm sorry. We moved to Youngstown, Ohio. And I was, last year I was there. We were there 2 or 3 years. I went to kindergarten in that school.
Yeah.
And I remember one Halloween, the teacher said to wear something for Halloween. I don't know what all she said, but I understood we were supposed to dress up special for that day.
Right.
And so I went home and told my mother that tomorrow we've got to wear Halloween clothes. And Mother said, "Are you sure it's tomorrow?" No, yes, I'm sure it's tomorrow. So she fixed me up in a girl's dress.
A girl's dress.
And I went to school, and everybody else was in ordinary.
They thought kind of silly, didn't they?
Well, I don't think I was old enough to feel silly. I wasn't smart enough. I was just kindergarten.
You know, they never had kindergarten when I was a kid. Never heard of it. Okay, so you then started the school in where, Pennsylvania?
No, this was in Youngstown.
Youngstown.
Then when I was 6, my father had lost his job, and the depression was starting for us a little early. Well, he lost heavily in the stock market, and so we had to sell the house and move to Alliance, Ohio, where we rented. And we were there a couple of weeks, and they found another place. I guess the first place wasn't good enough, but we moved into the downstairs of a large house that was out in a suburb there. And I remember old Mrs. Lawther. She was not well, and she had a son who was 17 years old. That was the oldest boy I had ever heard of in my life. So I only knew boys, 8, 10.
Right.
But this is an old boy. He's 17. He's a very nice young man, graduated from Mount Union College eventually. And they had a windmill out off the kitchen there. And now my mother's gone, I can tell this story,
Okay.
but I used to climb up that windmill. They had a ladder up the top, but up the top there was a catwalk of wood. And in order to get on it, you had to hang out over space, grab your arms up over it,
Oh, my.
and finally let go of the ladder with your feet and get your feet up there. And that was about 2 stories above the ground.
Oh,
I was
my.
6. So I did that 2 or 3 times, and I don't think my mother ever found out.
Well, my mother used to use the expression that she would have turned over in her grave if she'd known that. See,
Yeah.
she probably would.
Yeah. Well, I overworked my guardian angel.
See, right.
He had to retire early.
Well, now, give me some more information about those early years. You told me, I think, that it's a grandmother's place quite a bit.
Every summer, yeah, we begged to go.
Is that right?
Because that was, we get homesick for it. That was like home to us, you know. For me, anyway, because I was raised there.
Mm-hmm. So you went to your grandmother to live when your father lost his job, wasn't that it?
No, he stayed on at, well, my mother got bronchitis and we went down there. My father stayed on in Detroit because he had this good job. I'm sure they hoped things would change.
Oh, I see.
But eventually he decided he'd have to quit his job there. And he found a job in Youngstown, Seton Tube. So he moved his family down there and we were together again.
Mm-hmm.
So, but summertime, they would drive us out, school's out, they'd drive us out to Pennsylvania, and we'd stay there for the summer, and then they'd come out at the end of the summer and bring us home again.
Mm-hmm. And I imagine you have fond memories of things that happened at your grandparents', right?
Oh, yeah.
Give us some of that, will you?
Well, some of my memories are from the first 3 or 4 years. I told you about the rooster that chased me and flew up on top of my head, and I'd go screaming to the back door, and somebody, 2 or 3 adults would come out and chase the rooster away. And I remember I learned the game.
You think he was just mean, or did he have a kind of he was after you? He didn't like you.
Well, whatever I may have done to him, I have forgotten. But he maybe didn't forget.
Right.
I remember learning the game of keep away. My brother was 6 years older, and one of the neighbor's Stallsmith children decided to play catch and invited me to play in the middle. And they said, you try to catch the ball when we throw it to each other. Well, I never could, of course. They'd throw it over my head. So that was my introduction to playing catch. My father took a picture of that, and I saw the picture years later, and there I was about the height of a 2-year-old in diapers. I wouldn't have remembered my age there. I would have guessed older, but I have some clear memories that go back to 2 and 1. I remember sleeping in the upstairs bedroom in the corner of the house there and listening to the wind blowing through those tamarack trees.
Oh, yeah.
And that was my introduction to the world when the world was young. And the doves would coo in the morning just as at dawn,
Yes, sir.
That was great.
And you remember riding the horse to the pasture? And
Yeah,
all that
during the summer vacation, I have never sat in a saddle until recent years. They didn't have saddles. We just rode bareback. Yeah, and my brother learned to stand up on the horse, riding it to pasture.
Stand up on it?
Yeah, I think I did too, but I don't remember too clearly. It wasn't too hard, They were gentle horses. They weren't trying to throw us.
Yeah, they were workhorses, weren't they?
Yeah,
they had broad backs. See.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we always went barefooted in those days.
Oh yeah, so did I.
You feel the grass in your toes, and once I also felt a bee sting in my toe. I think I took off the clover head it was on.
I felt that. Yes, sir. Now, you remember the new car, the 27 Chevrolet?
Yeah, in Youngstown, my dad bought a new Chevy, and it was top of the line, cost $700 and some, which I learned later. But kids in the neighborhood gathered around. We were looking at it. It was a nice car.
Yes. Now, you have some other memories too about Halloween, for instance.
Well, I told you that about wearing the dress on the wrong day.
Yeah, that was the one you had there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, you also remember the Gene Tooney and Charles Lindbergh.
Yeah,
Dempsey.
that was when we were, the years we were in Youngstown. Let's see, this fellow, Charles Lindbergh, flew across the Atlantic to France.
Right.
That was 1927. And of course, it was very much in the news, and the kids were talking about it, and they were celebrating that at school. My brother got a commemorative coin or something about it, you know. Excuse me. Gene Tooney and Jack Dempsey. I can't remember which one knocked out the other. I think Jack Dempsey was world heavyweight champion first.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't that right?
Yeah.
And then Tooney knocked him out.
Right.
And I remember the older kids going around shadow boxing with each other and talking about these two guys.
Do you remember One-Way Corrigan?
One-Way Corrigan? Yeah, that came a little bit later.
He was not supposed to make the trip that he did across the Atlantic.
He read his compass wrong. He thought he was going west.
And so he said he just got to going the wrong way, see? But he made a record. Okay. Now, there was an effort in those days to try to promote peace in the schools.
Yeah, that was followed World War I, and that was supposed to be the war to end all wars. Of course, they didn't call it World War I. In those days, it's called World War. Mm-hmm. And so I remember in school classroom, every once in a while, we'd have soldiers, doughboys, come in with the World War I uniforms on and gas masks and showing bombs and things, trying to tell us how bad war is, you know. And every year the communities would put on declamation contests. I don't know really who sponsored those, but they were usually held in churches, or at least the ones I knew of, in which kids would work for prizes in writing speeches and delivering them on the evils of war. And then a number of, I think it was 1939, 1940, somewhere along there, we went to a high school graduation for a friend of ours, and the party, the girl who gave the valedictorian that day, we were in the defense program, and we were trying to help Great Britain and France, you know, like Germany, and she gave her speech on all the benefits of war.
Benefits?
Yeah, all the scientific advances. And I don't know who put her up to that, but it shows that when the times change, the speeches change.
That's right. But you see, what she says is true.
Yeah.
Terrific advances were made during war times.
Yeah.
Because at that time, you're fighting for your life, and the cost doesn't enter into it.
But we forget that those that give their lives in the war don't benefit from those things.
That's exactly right. Okay. Now, then the Depression came.
Yeah.
And you were just in the midst of it, weren't you?
Yeah, we sure were. We were the poorest of the poor, I guess. I didn't know it then. But
Your dad lost his job.
Yeah.
And you had an awful time trying to find enough money to live on.
Yeah.
Okay.
He worked for 10 cents an hour.
10 cents an hour.
On one job, 12 hours a day, he was sitting up with a man who was trying to commit suicide, and they paid him 10 cents an hour. That was one job he had. And there was one job he had that he quit. He cleaned out a couple outhouses for farmers for $1, and he decided, both he and my mother decided that at least we could cut down on our food. We didn't have to do that anymore.
That was just beyond the limit of what
you reached the limit there.
Mm-hmm. Now tell me, you told me that you had a very smart dog just about this time. Tell us about that dog.
Yeah, we moved out. They bought some 15 acres out in the country, and we didn't have money to build a whole lot there. first of all, temporarily, we put up a little shack just to keep the rain off of stuff. And it was, as big as this studio maybe, or smaller probably. But we didn't have any door in it, or window or anything.
Well, do you mean you lived in there?
Yeah, we lived in there for a few weeks, yes, until we got a building pulled onto the property. Paid a few $100s for building, and I don't know how much you paid to get it pulled onto the property. And we moved into that building. It was a small building too, but at any rate, we didn't have any door in the doorway in this little thing, so we couldn't lock it or anything like that. And one of the neighbors gave us a puppy. It was a few weeks old. It was a German police dog. And that puppy was he would have laid down his life for us at any time. He was ready to go, ready to do, and anything he saw us do, he understood and learned it immediately.
Isn't that great? You still had that dog all through?
Well, we had the dog for a few months.
Just a few months.
And then the county said they had to get a license for it, and we didn't have a license. So they took it to the town.
Oh, my.
We didn't have money to get a license.
How much was a license?
Well, I don't know, but it couldn't have been very much.
Isn't that
It might have been $1 or $2.
I bet that you just couldn't believe that that dog was not going to be with you.
No, that was heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you mentioned here the basket of food found on your doorstep. Now, this here I think is important. We don't realize that people, there are good people.
Yeah.
Now, this person never let it be known that they had done it, did they?
I don't think we ever found out who it was. I never did, anyway. I wasn't there. I think I was off to school or something. Or maybe I was out at Pennsylvania with my grandparents. But at any rate, my mother and father came home one day, probably from church, and found a bushel basket of food on their doorstep.
Wouldn't that be great?
It was great.
Yes.
Yeah.
You also mentioned Hoovervilles. What's a Hooverville?
Well, you know, during the Depression, a lot of people didn't have money to build decent houses. They just got pieces of wood that they could find and whatever they could find and build a shack, have a little roof over their head.
Right.
And you'd see these shacks and groups of them, and the kids whose parents probably were Democrats would laugh at them and call them Hoovervilles.
Because Hoover was the one that was in.
They blamed Hoover for the Depression, you know.
But you know, we don't realize just how bad it was. You know, people that didn't go through the Depression would never know what we were up against.
Yeah.
People that had good jobs, lost their jobs, and couldn't find any work at all. A lady told me from Virginia that she came home one day and here was a note from her unemployed husband. He'd always been a good worker, always provided, but there was no place he could get work. And the note said, at least you're not going to have this mouth to feed. I'm leaving. She never saw him again. Just think of that.
Some terrible things took place.
Mm-hmm.
I went across the border into Mexico one time and a couple of times, and I saw the poverty there and the buildings made of corrugated tin and cardboard and plywood and whatever they could find around, you know. There was some of that poverty in this country during the Depression. Not everywhere, but spots of it. We did have a relief program which helped a lot.
Do you remember what that was?
Well, I don't
How much
remember
you
much
got?
detail, but I remember we got some help from it, some clothes and things,
Mm-hmm.
and some food.
Okay. There was a product that was distributed not through the stores. Raleigh, isn't that
Raleigh
right?
products, something like Watkins products.
Yeah.
And Van Ness, or Ness products. And there were several of them. My father finally latched on to that. He wasn't a salesman, but he was a good man, and people liked him and trusted him. So with that Chevy, we still had that Chevy, and he drove all over, as far as Orville, which is 40 miles away, and I guess most of Stark County and a lot of some neighboring counties selling Raleigh products.
Oh, wait a minute, you said Orville.
Orville, Ohio, I can't remember what county that's in.
Oh, I can. Wayne County.
Wayne County.
I was born 5 miles from Orville.
Were you?
Marshallville.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
But one day sometimes he bartered, either because the people didn't have the money, or because he wanted something that they had. And one day he came home with a big 2-gallon crock of apple butter.
Okay.
And that was the most delicious apple butter we'd ever had. He said he'd got it up in Orville from one of his customers, Smuckers.
Yeah, Smuckers. They still have that. Yeah,
that was back in the 30s.
That's right. Well, listen, we're going to have to go off the air for a break, but we'll be right back in just a few seconds. Well, we're back again, and Frank was just telling me about cicadas. Tell us about that. What do you mean by that?
It was back in the early 30s, the 17-year cicadas came out, and my brother and I went back through the fields. They were everywhere, and we gathered them like berries off of the weeds and bushes.
Is that right?
And filled a couple flour sacks.
Now, are they green?
They have
Black.
green on, mostly black. They look like enormous flies, but they're bigger than bumblebees.
Oh,
You'll hear them buzzing around sometimes in the summertime, making rather loud noise, and you see them flying, and they land on tree trunks and things. And if you go up, sneak up behind them, you can usually grab them with your hand.
They're not very fast.
They're not very fast, no.
Well, why did you gather them?
Well, I don't really know. I think we just thought that since there was a lot of bugs, we ought to get them. We were just boys.
Didn't you get them, for 1 year?
Well, we brought them.
The chickens?
We brought them home and tried to feed them to the chickens. I guess the chickens ate some of them, and we may have had ducks that may have eaten some, but they didn't seem to like them too well. They were too big, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember the Dust Bowl?
Oh, yeah. But the Dust Bowl, of course, that was out in Oklahoma and western states, so we didn't see it close up, but it filled the air with so much dust that the sunsets were unusually red during 2 or 3 years there.
I remember I went to Florida on a trip, drove, and coming back, there was so much dust in the air that you could hardly see ahead of it.
Well, you went down through Tennessee or something. I guess they had some dust bowl down in there.
Yeah, that's right.
But
went down there.
those sunsets were gorgeous.
Yeah.
They filled half the sky.
And, of course, Northern Lights.
Oh.
We remember that so well.
Yeah, I got to tell you about that. Those Northern Lights were bigger. I don't know where they've gone to. I think they were associated with sunspots, maybe. But they were so big. These great sheets of different colors that would kind of, they looked like drapes hanging down in big folds, and they'd move slowly across the sky. And they'd reach up. Now, there was one night that they actually reached up to the zenith, straight overhead.
Mm.
It was a tremendous sight, and that night there was a milkman in Canton, Ohio, who stopped his truck, got down on his knees on the street to pray.
Because he thought it was the end of the world, huh?
He thought the Lord was coming.
Yes, sir. Now, in those days, they, of course, had the WPA, and it was something new, the government had not gotten into people's lives in those before this time like they have since. But they have had relief programs which really started at this time, didn't it?
Yeah, they tried to do things for the public. They tried to use a lot of different methods of stimulating economy, getting it going again, boost starting. But they decided that they had to at least give jobs to the people. They had been just giving relief, and that was people have pride, and they don't like to just be on relief. They want to have a job.
Well, it's right that they should.
Yeah, so they made these jobs. In order to make them go around, they told the contractors, road contractors, they couldn't, if they want this government contract, they can't use a road laying concrete. They have to hire all these men and furnish them picks and shovels. So my father got one of those jobs there. He got his leg hurt on the job, but they had these groups of men. You'd see them 20, 30 in a bunch, and they'd all have picks or shovels, and if they weren't leaning on them, they were digging or something.
Yeah, and one of the things they did was to clean up the streams.
Yeah.
Well, this wasn't a good idea.
My father was involved in that too. Yeah.
This wasn't too good an idea because you clean them up, you destroy the habitats.
Well, I don't think they worried about that, but the one thing that they did that was a mistake. They graded them, cut corners so the water would run faster, and sometimes that had rather devastating effect.
That's right. Okay. Now, they did things to the roads too, didn't they?
Yeah, they put in most of the country roads in Ohio before that were gravel or slag. They used an awful lot of slag in the States that they got from the steel mills, and that's one thing we've lost. Changed the method of making steel. We lost slag. We have to use crushed stone now. Slag was wonderful for that purpose. But one of the things the government decided to do was pave the roads, and their slogan was "Get the farmer out of the mud."
Get the farmer out of the mud.
But they didn't spend the money to pave full width roads. What they did was to pave one lane, so you could, as long as you weren't facing an oncoming car, you could drive in that on the paved lane.
Well, that wasn't a bad idea, was it?
No, it was good. It was great.
Because you could do twice as many roads by making half roads.
Yeah.
And you were helping more people.
Yeah.
So that it worked out.
We had to be careful. If our paved half was on the left side, we're coming up to the crest of a hill, where we have to get off on the gravel and go over the hill.
That's right. Well, now, did they have... with a half road, did they ever so often have a place where you could get off the road onto gravel?
Well, the road was full width.
Oh, the road was full width.
They weren't new roads. They were ones that had been gravel.
I see.
But they just pave on one side of it.
Okay. Now, there's something here that I noticed that you have said that I hadn't really thought of it before. And you say here that the Depression was ended by the war.
Yeah.
The war is what picked things up.
That was the solution that worked.
Is that right? Now, do you remember the Depression and the end of it when things got better?
Oh, yeah.
What did your father do then?
Well, one of the first good jobs my father got was the designing of an ordnance plant. An ordnance plant is a place where they manufacture guns and war material, whatever, They had built one of these plants over in Canton. My father worked on that. An interesting feature that, incidentally, was how to get some of these exceedingly heavy machines into their spots, which were like little cellars of maybe 3 or 4 feet deep, holes in the floor to sit down in because of the size of the machines. And I don't know what kind of machines. I don't know any more details than that. But they figured out a way to get those things. They were bringing them on rolls and skids. Figured out a way to get them down in those holes. They filled the holes with ice and froze them. And they moved the machine over on the ice. And then let it melt its way down in.
And of course, how about what wouldn't have been the water then, or did the water leak out?
Well, I don't know. I'm sure they took care of us. I'm sure they had drains down there. They'd have to.
I just was thinking here. Did your father go in? Was he in the service at the end of the Depression? Did he go into service then?
Well, my father was, oh goodness, he was born in 1882.
Oh, I see.
No, he was too old for World War I.
He was too old for World War I, huh?
No, he was married.
Well, then when you came along about this time, how old were you at the end of the Depression?
Well, I was young enough. I was still in my teens.
I see.
But I had, I had given my heart to the Lord as a sophomore in high school. And we were going to the Methodist Church. And the summer I graduated from high school, some of the godly women of the church, the prayer meeting group, persuaded my mother to go up to a camp meeting. It was a Assembly of God camp meeting up in Medina, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And they told her what wonderful music there would be there. And she loved wonderful music. So she wanted to go up. And she invited me to drive her up. And I could not resist that invitation. I knew nothing about the camp meeting, but I wouldn't pass up any chance to drive. So I drove her up there, and I tell you, I was impressed. I was knocked off my feet, you might say, by the things I saw. Well, the worship of God, and the sincerity of the people, and the tremendous preaching, and the preaching of the Bible teaching. I never heard anything like that. You know, it was just wonderful to me. And I went to the young people's tent. I didn't go right away because I figured, well, they would just play games like Skip to My Lou, My Darling, things like that. It's all I knew about young people's meetings. But they were having popcorn testimonies and quoting scripture, and they were as enthusiastic as the grown-ups. And I never wanted to leave.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that.
So, at any rate, this same prayer meeting group of women who I looked up to as like angels decided that since Jesus was coming soon, every young Christian needed to go to Bible school and to go to preaching the gospel. There's no time to waste. And they talked me into it. And I decided, yes, that's the most important thing in the world. So while I had wanted to be a scientist and an engineer, I put that aside and committed myself to God and decided I should be a preacher.
About how old were you now?
Well, I was 17.
17.
Yeah. So I went off to Bible school, and that's what I was doing when the war started and the draft came along. So I was, my mother was more wanting to keep me out than I was, I guess, although I consider...
Keep you out of what?
Keep me out of the war.
Out of the war.
But, well, my older brother went, and I had insisted I was a conscientious objector. I don't know if they'd sent me. I don't think I could ever have pointed the gun at another human being and pulled the trigger. I just had very strong feelings about that. But at any rate, they gave me, I think it was called a 4F as a ministerial student. So I missed the war.
Okay. Now, you were in as a student in the seminary, is that right?
Yeah, well, it went to Bible school, yeah. We didn't call them seminaries.
Mm-hmm. And did you graduate?
Well, I got the 3-year degree, and then I went out to Southern California Bible College and got the 4-year degree, and the 5th year THB, which is a degree in theology. And excuse me. And then I went to Phillips University, and
now, where is that?
That's in Enid, Oklahoma, and took 1 year in their seminary there, and then 1 year in their undergraduate school to get a degree in history.
You know, I can't help but think here as I'm talking to you, you did a lot of moving around for a poor boy, didn't you?
Well, after a while we did.
In Oklahoma.
Yeah. Well, after I graduated from high school, yes, I did a lot of moving from that point on. I've eventually been in every state of the Union except Montana, Alaska, and Hawaii. I haven't been in those states yet.
Is that right?
I've flown over Montana.
But you know, I have not been a person that has moved around as much as most people have. Now, when I was married, my wife loved to fish, and I had a cottage up in Canada. And when it came vacation time, up to Canada we would go.
Yeah.
Twice a year. And but I never got around. I've never been to the Grand Canyon or most any place. I haven't been to those places. Now, I was up in Oklahoma, but that was my great-granddaughters having a baby.
Yeah. Well, if I had an opportunity to circle the country again, there's a few places I haven't been to. I would like to see Yellowstone Park, for example. I'd like to see Painted Desert and the Petrified Forest, and a few things like that.
Mhm.
But I've seen the Grand Canyon and Yosemite and some other places that are very awe-inspiring.
Right. Okay, when I hear you are in seminary, and now you have your degree, then, did you become a minister?
I took out papers with Assemblies of God, and I preached for a while, but I was not successful financially. I mean, I didn't get enough calls and opportunities to make a living at it, so I was living off my parents until I decided, well, if God really wanted me in the ministry, somehow he would have multiplied my ministry a little more than this, and I've got to start making a living here. So I left the ministry at that time.
I see. It sounds like you were kind of an evangelist, were you? Going from
Well, I
church-
considered myself a teacher, but I didn't have I did teach in Bible school 1 year out in California, but I had this opportunity to do evangelistic work, take meetings at a little church up in Danville, Ohio. So I preached there 1 week, and we had several conversions. So they considered it, the pastor considered it successful.
Mhm. Now, folks, why don't you call in? Our number here is 855-9171. And then we have an 800 number, which if you're out of this area is toll-free, 1-800-948-1049. I'll give that again, 1-800-948-1049. Call in, folks. Now, let's kind of go ahead and talk about your life afterwards, when you were after you had, you might say, decided you were not going to be too successful as a minister. What did you do then to prepare yourself for another line of work?
Well, the first thing I did was to go out to Portland, Oregon, where a schoolmate of mine was. He had been begging me to come out for a long time because we were close friends in school, and he had he had a business in which he was making things for churches, Sunday schools. It's called Berg Christian Enterprises. He sells all over the nation now, but I helped there for a short time, also sold insurance, but I was not good at selling, and it just was closer to what I ought to be doing. I think my next job was an inspection job, aircraft inspector.
Aircraft inspector. My goodness, what, had you any
was there about 2
experience?
years. Well, I was good at math, and I remember I got a micrometer and went up to a friend of mine who was an auto mechanic and asked him to show me how to read the micrometer, and he showed me, but when I got to work that night, I'd forgotten what he said. And I was fumbling with it, and the nice fellow from Tennessee who was working there, named was Sparky, saw me, and real quietly he showed me how to read it. And from that point on, I was going okay.
Fine.
So, yeah, I was there 2 years, and I don't know whether I can remember changes, but or drafting as soon as I could. And in the meanwhile, I was taking engineering courses in schools. I went up to what's Cleveland State. It was called Penn College then, evening school, and I took a number of courses there, math and so on. And so we got enough courses under our belt to do engineering work, even though I didn't have the degree. But I went into aerospace. Most of my 30 years was spent in aerospace.
Now explain what aerospace is exactly.
Well, aircrafts and space vehicles.
Aircraft and space vehicles.
Yeah.
So that would include all sorts of vehicles,
Well,
as long as they flew, huh?
Yeah, one of my first jobs was at, in fact, it was my first drafting job, was up at Aerojet General near Sacramento. And they made the Polaris missile, which is a solid fuel rocket. And I worked on the thrust reversers there.
The thrust reversers.
Yeah, for some reason, they couldn't put just the exact right amount of fuel in there, and they couldn't stop its burning once it started. So they didn't want to burn too long. So they had a way to blow out some doors in the front end of it and burn it out both directions when they wanted to cut it off.
Is that right? Now, you had more electronic sort of jobs in that than what you mentioned, haven't you?
Well, not electronic, aircraft.
Aircraft.
I didn't have much in electronics.
But what were some of the other jobs that you had in aircraft?
I worked on the fuselage, the framework of a lot of planes, not because I wanted to, because somebody shoved me into that line of work. But whenever I could, I got mechanical items, and most of my work was in landing gear, aircraft landing gear. I worked on the 747, the Lockheed L-1011, Douglas DC.
Now, you say you worked on the landing gear. You mean trying to improve the gear?
Not improving the gear. The planes weren't made yet.
They weren't made yet.
But designing them so they would work.
I see.
You got to land these things.
Oh, yes, you do. But I thought probably they'd already been in use. But this is before they went
every plane that's designed is designed from ground up. Every landing gear is new.
Mm-hmm.
So, no, they don't use old parts or old designs. They use old experience. They learn as they go, but every design is new.
Okay. Now, I'm going to read a little poem here that I think is so good. And I try to do this just to break in. Now, thank God for you, good friend of mine. Seldom is a friendship such as thine. How very much I wish to be as helpful as you have been to me. Of many prayer quests thou one now art, on whom I ask God to impart rich blessings from his storehouse rare, and grant to you his precious care. When I recall from time to time how you've inspired this heart of mine, I find myself inclined to pray. God, bless my friend this very day. So often at the throne of grace, there comes a picture of your face, and then instinctively I pray that God may guide you all the way. Someday I hope with you to stand before the throne at God's right hand and say to you at journey's end, praise God, you've been to me a friend. I have two friends. One is my daughter, and one is Luella. And these both, they answer this very much.
That's a beautiful poem.
It is a beautiful poem. Okay. Now, your tri-motor. You haven't said much about that.
No. Well, that's the last one there. Ford made a tri-motor airplane as a motor propeller, of course, in front of the cockpit, and then one on each wing. They're monoplanes, just one wing over above, and the wheels hanging on. I guess the wheels were hanging on the wing, or I don't remember where they were. They were a few feet out from the fuselage. I know that. So one of them was at an airfield near Louisville, Ohio, and I went down there, and they were taking people up for about 10 minutes for $1. Took a magazine long, so I would have something to read while I was writing. One of the stupider things I've done. And I remember we were flying around near Canton, Ohio there, and I was looking at the ground and the trees and the things, and it didn't seem like we were moving very fast. And the wheel, I looked at the wheel out there, and it wasn't turning at all. And so I opened the window and stuck my head out. Sure enough, we were moving.
You were moving. Okay. Now, let me ask you about these kitchen tables you mentioned.
Oh, about the end of the Depression, everybody was trying to figure out how to solve the economy, and all kinds of ideas came up. There was Townsonites and ham and eggers and direct credits and technocrats, and I can't remember what else. Script money, and there were some companies that put out script money. There was something like credit cards or something. I don't know how. But at any rate, one of the things that men spent their time was talking with each other about how to solve the economy. We were all amateur economists.
Oh, yes.
And I remember that coming up to our kitchen and sitting around. We had oil lamp. And they'd sit around the kitchen table, and with my dad and mother, and they expound their theories about what ought to be done.
I think we all of us got into that somewhere along the line where we felt we had an idea that would work. But
you remember the Lawson Milk Company?
Lawsonville, no.
Milk Company.
Oh, Milk Company.
Yeah, they've had them around Columbus here. They closed up a few years ago. Most of them, I guess all of them did. But that was founded by Alfred Lawson back during the Depression. He was going to sell milk cheaper. He was a socialist. He thought he could sell milk cheaper than these bloated plutocrats, the capitalists. And he had all kinds of theories. And in addition to selling milk, he put out a paper in which he expounded his theories, including some atheistic theories. Well, that was one of the things that we tossed about and argued over.
Yeah, you mentioned here how when you were a kid that things were different. You had a second grade teacher. What did she have on her car?
Oh, yeah, and I keep trying to remember her name, and I don't remember her. I can see her in my mind's eye. She was tall and young and pretty, and she was always dancing around and smiling, and if a kid was out of place, why, she'd dance right over to him and take him by the shoulders and dance him to where he was supposed to be. But I noticed was it a rear window or a bumper somewhere? They didn't have bumper stickers, that stuff. She had a sign that said Billy Sunday. And I guess she had gone to his revival meetings or were advertising them or something.
Yeah.
I knew nothing about what it was.
Well, I tell you, I was at Billy Sunday's when he had a tabernacle down here on Goodale Street, and listen, he impressed you.
Yeah.
He impressed you. He started out, they tell me, to be rather a quiet individual, quiet preacher. But he got so caught up with the Lord's work that he really put on a tremendous show, no question about it. And I'm sure he meant everything he said.
Yeah, I might be here because of the H.H. Bosworth Evangelistic Crusade in Detroit. My mother, after my brother was born, my mother lost a couple, or
children.
I don't know how many children, by miscarriages. And then she got in the healing line, H.H. Bosworth, and went up and was prayed for. And so she could have another child. Mm-hmm. And then I was born. So she credits that prayer line for my being here.
Well, I bet it would work. You know, I feel this way. We don't realize how much the Lord's a part of our life if we'll just let him be there.
Yeah.
We're going to have to go off of the air now, but we'll be back in just a few minutes. And I want you to call in, 855-9171, 855-9171. And I want to mention this. Next Sunday, the beekeepers will be on, and we'll have a guest. I'm going to be in Michigan. I'm going to go over and meet my grandson, Craig Patterson, who has been transferred by his company to Japan for 3.5 years. So I want to see him before he gets out of the country.
You've been listening to WCBO's Thanks for the Memories. Please stay tuned following the 3 o'clock newscast for the final half hour of Thanks for the Memories. Welcome back for the final half hour of WCBO's Thanks for the Memories. Let's return now to Studio B and your host, Harold Bachman.
Yes, well, I'll tell you, if you haven't heard his name, maybe you tuned in after I had introduced him, but this is Frank Vosler. And Frank, you live now over here in
Morse
Jersey.
Road.
On Morse Road.
Yeah, about how far? About 2 miles from here.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And have you lived there a long time, Frank?
About 26 years.
Oh,
we moved in 69.
Well, you were working then.
27 years.
He's 74 now, so you can see that he must have been about 47 when he was moved over here. So he's been there quite a while, haven't you,
You got
Frank?
me figured out.
Now, were you working when you came over?
Yeah. Well, see, I worked all over the country, so it didn't matter too much where I lived, just so I was near an airport.
So that you didn't expect to be able to live too close to your work because your work changed so much.
Right.
Okay, explain that to us. So what were you? What type of electronics or that isn't the word? Aircraft work were you doing?
Well, you know, every time a new plane was built, they would hire thousands of people, and they would farm out a lot of the work to companies all over the country, and say get these contracts, and then they would have to hire people come in and design various parts of the plane until it was done. Then there'd be somebody else starting another plane somewhere, and we'd find out about it, get our names on the list, and go there.
Go there.
Yeah.
An entirely different job, though. Entirely, oftentimes it would be unrelated to what you were doing before, right?
Well, it was related. It'd be another airplane, but it'd be a different airplane, you know.
Mm-hmm. And the purpose of it many times was much different, right?
Yeah, I think I started to tell you the planes I worked on, all the big ones, the Boeing 747 and the Lockheed L-1011 and Douglas DC-8 and sometimes I forget the names of these things, but the Grumman not the Mustang, that's too old for me, but the F-14, that at my age, 74, sometimes names of my own family disappear from my mind.
Too.
But at any rate, I worked on that. I worked on the Apollo project too, the landing module and the engine, the fuel mix mechanism for the landing module.
I think he's giving you something there.
Well, no, it wasn't the Convair, no. No, this is a fighter plane, a Navy fighter plane.
Oh, a Navy fighter plane.
But anyway.
Mike, who is on the board today, has had a similar experience to what Frank has. He's worked in this sort of thing, haven't you, Mike? Many years.
Well, no, that was some years ago when I was serving in the United States Air Force. I worked with rescue helicopters and large rescue aircraft. But I was in the electronics, which you're mistaking. He was in the airframe of the aircraft.
I see. Interesting.
I worked on Sikorsky helicopters, 2 or 3 different ones. And I told you on the Polaris missile, we worked on the Saturn rocket that sent the folks to the moon.
Yeah.
I worked on Navy trainer planes on the landing gear. Probably 2 or 3 others that I'm not thinking of right now.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Now I want to leave that sort of thing. I want to talk about your walk with the Lord, Frank. Now, as a boy, did you go to church every week? Now, do remember this, Frank. There's just a lot of people out there that were brought up in families that didn't go to church. They didn't have the opportunity. They didn't have the training that they needed. But you did go to church, didn't you?
Well, we went to church every week. Yes, my parents were very strong on that.
And did you learn to know what it was to be the Lord's child in those days?
No. I learned Bible stories. I guess the requirement for salvation was never one of the lessons. Somehow that got skipped over. I don't know why. Now, in some churches, they don't skip it over. Some churches, they make it a point to bring their children to the Lord, to saving knowledge of the Lord. But other churches, they don't.
Well, isn't it true, though, that the ordinary denominations like Lutherans and Methodists and people like that, they don't go into that. That is, they didn't in our day. I think they're doing more of it today.
You think they are?
Oh, I think they're doing a better job. They could do even better, but I do think that they are allowing people. You take the Catholic churches. They allow Pentecostals to be priests, and it's good to have this happen, because actually, and this is just Harold Bachman talking, actually, I can't see how you can be a child of the Lord and not have given your life to Him as a Pentecostal. That's the way I feel. Okay, so you was like I was. You was brought up in a church that they didn't tell you much about. That God was your friend. He was sitting beside you. He was watching over
Well,
you.
yeah, we saw Jesus with a lamb and is carrying the lamb about, and little children around him, and so on. So we had that picture, and but we were kind of trained into being Christians. We didn't come by the way of the cross to repent of our sins, but we were taught into it, and we got to the point where we came to assume that we were Christians.
So Mike's got to have something here to say. What is it, Mike?
Well, I was just put in mind of that when you talked about that picture. I have a plate that my mother gave me with that same painting. I don't think anybody's ever titled it, but I think one thing that has to be remembered, the reason why the Lord is carrying that sheep, because he understood, for example, what David wrote, because he was a shepherd. The reason why that shepherd is carrying around that sheep, that is the sheep that's been running off and going its own way and getting into trouble, and the shepherd had to break that sheep's leg with that staff and carry it around with him until that sheep amended its ways and learned to stay with the flock.
Until the leg healed. Huh?
I suppose maybe we could call that painting Tough Love.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think that a lot of churches are too chicken to tell the people that they are sinners and have to repent if they expect to get to heaven. They don't want to fluff any feathers and hurt any feelings. But somehow, even Nathan, going to the king of Israel, had to say, "Thou art the man." And we've got to get back to making it clear and stop with this mushy mouth stuff and tell them each individual has to come to Christ.
Frank. I feel this way, that today they talk so much about the love of God, but our God is a jealous God. And when we say give ourselves to him, he expects us to change our ways.
Yeah.
And I think there's not enough emphasis on people changing their life when they become Christians.
That's right, and the change is a big one, too. The Bible says that we are in the kingdom of darkness. We are dead in trespasses and sins. And when you go from death to life and from darkness to light, that's a tremendous change. It's not something that can happen accidentally or in your sleep or while you weren't paying attention. And when it happens, you're deeply involved.
Right.
And you know it.
You know, Frank, I want now to tell us, so how did you come from this feeling that I'm just attending a club until you found out that it was great to become a child of God? How did this happen?
Yeah, well, you know, previously, I suppose if some zealous personal worker had accosted me on the subject, I would have said, of course I'm a Christian. I was born in America. What do you think I am, a pagan? But when I heard the preaching gospel, we got a saved pastor, and that's another story in itself. But thank God we went to a little village church where saved pastors were sent, and he had an evangelistic meeting every February, and the first February I helped, because of course I was a Christian, so I helped with the evangelistic meeting, however, whatever that meant. I attended anyway. The next year, though, I started out doing the same thing, but he kept preaching, or the evangelist in that case, Reverend Springer, kept saying that if you don't know when you were saved or don't remember being saved, you're not saved. And that kind of got to me because I didn't remember when I was saved, and I had no experience to look back on.
And he was right.
Yes, he was right, but I wouldn't agree with that because I said, well, here's an exception. I'm a Christian, you know. So that was my feeling. But I got thinking about that one night by 6 o'clock in the evening before going to church, and I thought I had this idea. I heard about 144,000. I thought, well, God will take 144,000, stack us up according to how good we are, and count down 144,000 and put a cardboard in there.
Right.
And the ones above that line go to heaven, the rest go to hell. And I thought to myself, well, I'm pretty good. If God wouldn't take me to heaven, he wouldn't be fair. But God used that thought to strike me with conviction. Just then I thought, that's an awful thought, to even think that God is not fair, to suggest that. And then I began to get rational. I began to think, well, it's stupid of me to take a chance like this. Here, all I'm supposed to do, I'm not supposed to be in the top 144,000. I'm just supposed to go up to the altar and confess my sins. That's what the preacher said. So I decided to do it that night. And I just went ahead when we got to church and he gave the altar call. I went up to the altar and gave my heart to the Lord. And then I knew it was real.
Then you knew it was real.
Yeah.
You know, I think that is true. When we really come to the Lord, we know it's real.
Amen.
Before, we just think we're being good people. We came up here, we said that we loved the Lord, and that's it. And then the people go and live the same life as they did before.
Yeah. But when one comes alive spiritually, he knows it. The whole world gives a different light on it, a different feeling, a complexion.
Yes, because you change.
The birds sing better.
That's right. That's a good point. The birds sing better, see. Have a new message for you.
Yeah.
Okay. So then you started, after this evangelistic time, you started then to change your life, didn't you?
Well, that changed my life. I got into the Bible and read it through 3 to 5 chapters at a time, which is a lot of reading for me. And I memorized verses, and I was really hungry for the things of God. But we didn't know of any other church than where we were going at that time, so we did the best we could right there. But we had a good prayer meeting group, some good prayer meeting women, and they talked my mother into going up to a camp meeting. My mother had, I think, been to a camp meeting of another church, another denomination before that, but they said, oh, you'll love this camp meeting. They have wonderful music. Mother loved good music and good old gospel singing. And so she went up to the camp meeting, but she didn't drive much. And she got me to drive her up there. I don't know whether she got me to or whether I begged to, but I was...
anytime you get a chance to drive.
Anytime I get a chance to drive, I wanted to do it. I didn't care where she was going. So I drove her up to Medina on the other side of Akron from where we were living, and went to this camp meeting. It was a big tent that's pitched on a kind of a wasn't exactly a park. It was they had a racetrack and things like that there, something like where they have the Ohio State Fair, that kind of a place, a small town size. And they had this tent there. They had some smaller tents, and some of the people stayed in tents. I don't think they had any cottages because it was all temporary for us. But we had Reverend Alan A. Swift there, was one of the great Bible teachers of Assemblies of God. We had John Calenda, who was one of the great evangelists of Assemblies of God. There's some tremendous preaching there, and I'd never heard anything like that in my life. And I saw the people with raising their hands and the shine of God in their faces and the glory of God, praising the Lord, and the singing, and it was terrific. And truth times somebody would say, well, wouldn't you like to go over to the young people's meeting? And now I was hungry for something spiritual. I didn't want to go to a young people's meeting because they sing Skip to My Lou, My Darling, and things like that, you know, which was all I knew about young people's meeting. But finally I went over there, And there they were jumping up, giving popcorn testimonies and quoting scriptures. One of the things they did that evening, they take turns quoting, going down through the alphabet. Somebody would quote a scripture beginning with A, and the next person beginning with B. Excuse me. And I know that when they got to X, somebody got up and said, "Except you be born again, you cannot see the kingdom of heaven." So they went through the alphabet that way, and and the preaching was great. You know, it was such a contrast; it just swept me off my feet. So we were sold lock, stock, and barrel.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, now go back to the church that you had gone back to before, and
yeah, we did. And then we would visit the Pentecostal churches. Incidentally, I received the baptism. My brother and I received the baptism of the Holy Spirit up there. I believe, yeah, at that camp meeting, and I believe my mother did too.
Oh, I'm glad. I didn't know your brother was with you.
Yeah, we all went up there. Well, we may not have gone up in the first trip, but before the camp meeting was over, we were all up there. And my brother called to Africa. He went over to Africa as a missionary later.
He did?
Yeah.
Isn't
Liberia.
How something like that can just change a person's life.
Oh, yeah.
The whole family's life. Huh?
Yeah. Well, it made a difference, all right.
How was your mother? Was she different after that?
She was so excited when the offering came around. She took her diamond wedding ring off, put it in.
She did. Well, she was excited, wasn't she?
Yeah, we went lock, stock, and barrel, as I
you
say.
Sure did. Isn't that something?
That was great.
Put her diamond ring in there, in the collection plate.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we met in homes. We didn't have a church building, Pentecost church. Actually, we continued in the Methodist church there, but that pastor was moved somewhere else, and another pastor came who didn't like anything that we liked. He was the other type of pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one meeting, a board meeting, I think it was after a midweek, I don't remember, after the Sunday morning service probably. We were staying around, I was listening in, and one lady there who was kind of a socialite asked if they could dispense with prayer meetings during the summer because it was too much work getting up the food and entertainment for her. So that was like writing Ichabod to me. I mean, anytime a prayer meeting is too much work getting up food and entertainment.
Well,
so
that would be the old way of looking at it.
Yeah, so we just didn't fit in. We finally left and started a church of our own.
Started a church of your own.
We met in Holmes first, and then we went down to Alliance, Ohio, and sometimes over Louisville, Ohio, where they had little churches every few miles away. And eventually we bought a building, a small, well, it was had been a fire station been there actually once. It's about a 2-car garage size. So we held forth there for a while. And the Assemblies of God in Marlboro now have for a number of years they had the Methodist Church. Methodist Church built a new brick church out in the country. And last time I was in Marlboro about a year or two ago, they had the village school where I spent 6 years in grade school. So they fixed that up.
You know, Frank, you haven't mentioned your wife.
No.
And I know you've been married quite a few years, haven't you?
Yeah, about 39, I guess.
39.
Yeah, 39 years.
And I imagine that you've got some things you'd like to talk about. Your life with your wife. What's her first name?
Her first name's Ethel.
Ethel.
She was Ethel Gregory. I met her in a church in California, Bethel Temple, which is the large downtown church of Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
And she was, and I were the young people at the time, among the young people. Of course, we wouldn't be now.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
But at any rate, I left there, but I corresponded with her. And, you know, the first letter in which I proposed to her, she never got.
She never got.
I sent it airmail, special delivery, and it wasn't delivered.
It wasn't delivered.
The next letter I sent regular mail, and it got there. And she said yes. So
I was going to say, did she say yes or no? Huh?
no, she said yes. So
Well, that was good. Now, you know, you kind of weren't too romantic. You should have found a way to get to her and get down on your knees and do it formally, see?
you think I should do that now?
I think you should do it now, see?
Well, do you want to come up to our house and show me how?
I set the example, huh?
Yeah.
No, I think it's very interesting, but you have had a good life, haven't you?
Oh, yes. Nothing to complain about. Made some horrible mistakes, but it wasn't anybody else's fault.
Who hasn't made mistakes?
Yeah.
Yes. Now, how about talking for a moment about the passenger trains that stop at every town? Because this is what happened when we were young. My gosh, I lived at this Marshallville, which was 5 miles from Orville, and Orville was the train center of that area. I don't know, maybe it still is, but it was in those days. And we would get on the train to go someplace, and it stopped at every little town.
Yeah.
You didn't go by them.
Well, they had the milk run. Yeah, they had the milk run trains, and they had their expresses.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going across the country, well, you'd skip some of the stations.
So you can remember that, though, how it used to be.
Yeah, back in 1926, I went up, or my family went up to a funeral. My uncle died. And I remember riding on a train up there. At nighttime, we took a Pullman. I think I was in upper berth, as near as I can remember. I remember looking out through the curtains and seeing the porter, and I don't know what he was doing, bringing me, I suppose I had hollered for water. I think he was bringing me something. But when we got into Detroit, and I'm sure I didn't know that's where I was, but I remember looking out the window, and I guess the berths had been put up. And I think those Pullman trains, I don't remember they converted like they do in Europe. We probably went to another car. But anyway, I was sitting in a seat looking out the window, and to come to the station, there were those checker cabs. And you maybe remember them. They had a band of, you remember the checker like Ralston cereal?
Right.
A little band of 3 or 4 rows of black and white checkers, about an inch or so square. It went all around below the windows.
Right.
And I remember seeing them in the train station there. And then we have one other scene from that time, and that's a car that family or relatives were in. I don't know whose car it was. It's one of those open things from about the World War I vintage black. It had the soft top and isinglass windows rolled up or whatever they were. And it was quite open. I think they call them touring cars.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was in the back seat and I got sick and they had to stop and let me out by the roadside until I threw up whatever it was. But anyway.
Well, I remember when I was younger that I was in Pittsburgh. And I thought that was the dirtiest town I'd ever been in because smoke everywhere.
Yeah.
And I see you have here about Pittsburgh gets fresh air, so maybe we can do it.
Well, you know, they have all this to do about air pollution, things like that today. I remember they talked.
Frank, they tell us I've got to get off of the air. Our time is up. Well, thank you very much.
You've been listening to Thanks for the Memories with Harold Bachman. Please join us every Sunday afternoon following the 2 o'clock newscast for Thanks for the Memories on WCVO.